Welcome back, everyone. Next up, we have UR Energy. It trades on the New York Stock Exchange American under the symbol URG and on the TSX under the symbol URE, and is a uranium mining company operating the Lost Creek in-situ recovery uranium facility in south central Wyoming, and has produced, packaged, and shipped more than 2.6 million pounds since commencement. Please welcome its CEO, John Cash. Welcome, John.
Hey, good morning. I really enjoy being on the show here and looking forward to talking about our projects.
We look forward to hearing it. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll jump right into the slideshow and without further ado and talk about our projects. The opening slide there is showing our Lost Creek project. It's up and built and running. This is inside the in-situ processing plant. And the photograph on the right is showing some of the drums of yellow cake that we've shipped. But before going any further, I have to do the obligatory disclaimer statement. It's very likely I'll make some forward-looking statements. Please do your own due diligence before investing. So I'll start off here with a slide that shows really kind of the summary of our projects before I go into some of the market details and company details. But we have two flagship properties. The first is Lost Creek. It's been up and running for over 8 years now, and we've produced about 2.7 million pounds of uranium in that time period. We've allowed production to decline in response to market conditions, but the last fall, the price of uranium began to climb, so we made the decision to start the drilling again and to start construction. So we are actively involved right now in building out our next header house 2-4, in our second mine unit, in an effort to shorten the ramp-up period when we're able to sign contracts and go into production. We've got a great resource on that property, 11.9 pounds of measured and indicated resource with an additional 6.6 million pounds of inferred resource. We've got a great record of low-cost production. In fact, we believe we are the lowest cost production of any publicly traded company globally outside of Kazakhstan, and we're very proud of that. We've got a management team that has run in-situ projects in Wyoming and Nebraska, and we know how to do it. We know how to put the pounds in the can. So when we return to production, we believe our operating costs are going to be about $16.34 a pound. That's C1 cash cost at the mine site. That is very consistent with what our cash costs have been historically when we've been in full production. So we're looking forward to getting back to that. The Lost Creek project itself is fully permitted, up and running. In addition to that, we are expanding the property through permitting over to an adjacent property called LC East, and also expanding into additional mining horizons within Lost Creek, referred to as the KM horizon at LC East, but additional HJ mine units at Lost Creek. That requires 3 major permits. We already have 2 of those 3 permits obtained. We're working on that 3rd one right now and expect to have that finalized this calendar year. The second project that we have, flagship property, is our Shirley Basin property. It's also in Wyoming and also an in-situ property. It is fully permitted. Of the 3 major permits that we are required to have, we have all 3 put to bed, all ready to go, and that facility is ready to construct out. When we construct out that facility, that will essentially double the size of our production capacity for the company. Because at Lost Creek, our wellfield capacity there is 1.2 million pounds per year. And at Shirley Basin, the capacity there that's licensed will be 1 million pounds per year. We intend to only build out the front end of the plant at Shirley Basin and ship that material over to Lost Creek for final processing in the plant. And that will help us minimize the capital expenditure at Shirley Basin, since we only need to build out that front end. Shirley Basin has a unique distinction. We believe it is the first commercial in-situ mine for uranium in the world. So when we bring it back into production as an in-situ miner, we're going to be bringing in-situ back home to where it got started, where that technology was initially developed on a commercial basis. But since it's a brownfield project, there are a number of advantages that provides us. A lot of the infrastructure is already in place. The roads, shops, electric substation and power lines are there. We have a waste disposal cell we're able to use. So a lot of that's already in place. That means we only have to build out the front end of that plant. Also, the resource there is very shallow. And because of that, the drilling costs are minimal. And also it's been drilled out historically. The resource there, 8.8 million pounds of M&I measured and indicated. It's all completely drilled out. We don't have to go in and do any more delineation drilling or exploration. We know exactly where the resource is at. So in the history of the company, as we produced at Lost Creek, we took advantages of contracts with utilities. We've sold about 2.4 million pounds into those contracts. In addition to that, we've been able to purchase material and sell that into contracts as well. So an additional 1.8 million pounds there. We're very proud of the inventories we have, 284,000 pounds drummed, ready to sell. It's sitting at the conversion facility right now in Illinois, and we believe we can convert that to cash relatively quickly. The spot market price for uranium is moving very quickly. In fact, this slide is just a few days old and it's already out of date. Right now, the spot price for uranium is about $64 a pound. So if we convert that 284,000 pounds of inventory over to cash, we're looking at right around $18 million of income from that. So I'll take a step back from the properties just for a little bit and talk about some of the broader dynamics, what's really driving the price of uranium, because it has been very exciting in the last several months. But first, what happened is green energy. The world is really beginning to recognize that if we're going to go carbon free in our economies worldwide, nuclear is truly the only solution that's going to be able to get us there. And we've already taken great steps. The US, for example, about 20% of our nation's electricity is derived from nuclear power. A lot of people don't realize that, especially if they live away from a nuclear power plant. And worldwide, about 10% of our electricity is generated through nuclear. Right now, we have about 440 operating reactors in the world, and 55 are in active construction. About 100 reactors are on order, and another 300 are proposed. So there's tremendous growth there. In fact, the World Nuclear Association, WNA, they're projecting that global demand will grow by 4.2% annually. That's in their reference or base case. In their upper case, they're projecting annual growth of about 7.9% annually. So tremendous growth coming forward. So the main reason that we have nuclear power, of course, is for electric generation, but the uses are moving beyond the conventional. Now we're looking more into other uses for nuclear energy, including hydrogen production. There are meaningful steps being taken globally to take a look at hydrogen, so we have green hydrogen production instead of from fossil fuels. Also, the crypto miners and the electric vehicle markets, they are really beginning to look hard at nuclear, because why develop those products if you're going to just fuel them with carbon generating sources, fossil fuels? So there's a lot of demand from those components being developed as well. Another source of demand that we're looking at, maybe not so much in the near term, but perhaps in the next 5 to 8 years, are small modular reactors. And there are a number of countries around the world that are designing and actively building out small modular reactors. And in fact, there are 11 countries engaged in that, and they're operating SMRs in 3 of those. While all of this is going on, there is a significant supply disruption from COVID and simply from market fundamentals that's resulted in a structural deficit in supply over the last several years. So things have really gotten out of balance, and that's helping to drive the price. But going a little bit further into the demand for nuclear power, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but this has been heavily in the news the last several months. But China in particular is really beginning to build out their nuclear industry. They have announced plans to build at least 115 reactors in the next 15 years, 10 per year. That's an incredible build rate. But if anyone can do that, China certainly has the ability. Also, the UK, South Korea, France, all of them have announced significant growth in their nuclear programs. A lot of this was even before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But since that has reinforced, especially European countries' desire to move away from natural gas from Russia and into the nuclear realm so that they can be self-reliant and not dependent upon Russia. And also, there have been a number of elections globally where pro-nuclear prime ministers or presidents have been put into power, including in South Korea, where they are now not going to be canceling out the program, but in fact maintaining that program and growing that program for the foreseeable future. Other countries like the Philippines, Belgium, Japan, others have all announced significant growth in their program. But here in the U.S., bringing it home, we have 2 plants under construction right now in Georgia by Southern Company. One of those is scheduled to come online this year, and a second one coming on next year. We're also beginning to see tremendous government support for nuclear energy in the U.S., again, primarily for its carbon-free attributes. But at post-Russia invasion of Ukraine, there's a lot more support for domestic infrastructure as well, so that we can move away from foreign supplies. But I'll call out just a couple of things that are going on. First is the U.S. Uranium Reserve. That was passed by a bipartisan vote under the Trump administration, and it allocates funding to the Department of Energy to set up a reserve program where pounds of uranium will be purchased from domestic producers and held by the U.S. government in case there's a supply disruption. Ironically, that was put into place pre-invasion of Ukraine. So there was a little bit of foresight there that we were becoming too reliant on other nations, in particular Russia and Kazakhstan. The other bill that's been passed is the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, and that allocates $6 billion largely to extend the life of the existing reactor fleet here in the U.S. But what's interesting about that is there's a provision within that bill that says funding for those reactors, there will be a preference given to companies that buy domestic pounds. And as a domestic uranium miner, we are hoping to be able to benefit from that. And while all of these things are going on at the federal level, there's also a lot going on at the state level, where a number of states have passed legislation encouraging the development of nuclear power. So the second thing that happened beyond the recognition of green energy attributes of nuclear is when the price began to move up from that, we had a number of financial institutions begin to recognize that, hey, we need to be involved with nuclear power. We've got to jump in early in this to be able to enjoy the financial benefits. So a lot of people were starting to move in, like hedge funds, like MMCap and Anchorage. They were jumping in, purchasing pounds. You also had ETFs like North Shore and Global X making investments. Even the mining companies were jumping in because the price of uranium was so low. They said, we can't produce it for that. Let's go out and buy it on the market. So big mining companies like Cameco and Kazatomprom, Denison, and a number of others were out buying pounds. But really the big game changer was in July of last year when Sprott announced the development of their Physical Uranium Trust, or the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, affectionately known as the SPUT in our industry. But they've acquired a lot of pounds since they put that program together, over 52 million pounds of purchasing. All of that has been off of the spot market, nearly all of it as U308. So effectively, that is mopping up any mobile inventory that's out there and is putting a lot of pressure on the market. That really began to move the price. Shortly after Sprott instituted their physical trust, Kazakhstan, who is a major supplier globally of uranium, jumped into the mix as well and said, hey, we're going to do something similar. And they've allocated $500 million to put together a physical uranium fund. That also is putting pressure on the market. So the third thing I wanted to talk about here that's really driving prices and is more recent is geopolitical risk. Russia is a major supplier of uranium. So when they invaded Ukraine, it really put the industry on edge because people are very nervous about the long-term supply coming out of Russia and also Kazakhstan. Russia is a major supplier, not just globally, but here in the U.S. They provide about 20% of our U.S. demand. Most of that is in the form of enriched uranium product. Kazakhstan is another gorilla in the room. They provide about 46% of primary global supply. Russia has a lot of influence on Kazakhstan, and if the supply from Russia is cut off either through us sanctioning them or vice versa, there's a real potential that Russia could put their thumb on Kazakhstan and cut off those supplies out of Kazakhstan. So we're keeping a close eye on that. Right now, the material continues to flow, but there are bills in both the House and the Senate, in fact, a couple of bills that are being advanced that ultimately would cut off that supply of material out of Russia. So we're keeping a very close eye on that because that could really turn the industry on its ear if any of those things happen. While that's going on, we have to keep in mind that there really is not a great alternate supply outside of Russia and Kazakhstan. We used to get a lot of material out of Africa, but today, if you look at the ownership of the mines in Africa, several of them are owned by China. So those pounds are largely going to China. They're not available on the market. Otherwise, you could take a look at Canada. They used to be a major producer. They do have the ability to ramp up over time, but over time is the operative word here, because they have McArthur River and Cigar Lake that are ramping back up, but there's limited capacity there, and certainly nowhere near enough capacity there to backfill any supply disruption out of Kazakhstan. So got to keep all that in mind. So bringing it back home again to the U.S., while you have that potential looming shortage of supply, here in the U.S., our production has declined to almost nothing. The chart I'm providing here is from the EIA, the Energy Information Administration of the U.S. government. And you can see that the last 3 years, production is so low that they've not even been able to record it on the chart because of confidentiality concerns. At the same time, in the U.S., we burn about 50 million pounds of uranium per year. By comparison, globally, we consume about 170 million pounds per year. So a very big chunk of global demand is right here in the U.S., yet we have virtually no supply. But that's where URE Energy comes back in, and I'll switch gears from talking about the broader market to talking about our properties. But Lost Creek, our flagship property, is up and running. We're able to ramp that up very quickly. We've got a great resource in the ground, 11.9 million pounds of measured and another 6.6 million pounds of inferred. We've got a proven track record at that property. We've got fantastic recovery rates. Typically in the in-situ industry, if you get a recovery rate of anywhere from 60 to 80%, that's pretty good. You're pretty happy with that. But at Lost Creek, our recovery rates have been right at 90% on average project-wide. So we're very proud of that. As far as ramp-up time, we can ramp up very quickly. We believe we can ramp up in about a 7-month time frame. We've got ongoing drilling and construction to further shorten that time period so that we can feed into long-term contracts very quickly. You can also see in that map in the top left, surrounding Lost Creek, well, we control everything in green. The vast majority of it is on federal mining claims, about 35,000 acres in total. We've had great success with exploration in the past, and we have a number of roll fronts or mineralized trends that we can continue to chase into the future with the objective of increasing our resource there. We are a proven producer, and the reason I threw this chart into the presentation is I want to show what our C1 cash costs are at the mine. And I'll draw your attention to 2015 when we produced 784,000 pounds of uranium. If you go toward the bottom, our average cash cost was $16.27 a pound. That's fantastic. We've got established senior management at the site. They know how to mine uranium. They know how to work in a tight market, and they've demonstrated our abilities. So this is a real project, very low cost, and we're able to bring that back up within just a few months of getting a go signal. And taking a look again at Shirley Basin, a little more detail there. It's completely drilled out, great resource of measured and indicated of 8.8 million pounds. It's a high-grade deposit. It's a proven past in-situ producer back in the 1960s. We own most of that land. Only a small portion of that is on BLM or federal lands, so that helps hold down our mining cost. We have the authorizations we need to go into construction and operation, and we're going to move toward that just as soon as the contracting and pricing justifies that move. So we have that drilling program ongoing in Header House 2-4. We're also delineating the next several header houses at Lost Creek. Again, the objective here, shorten that ramp-up time, de-risk the project even further, even though it's already largely de-risked, and be more attractive to our utility customers by showing that, hey, we're ready to rock and roll. We've been able to maintain key staff at the site. They are experienced miners, not just at Lost Creek, but at other production facilities in Wyoming, so they know how to put pounds in the can. One thing that we've not talked about very much historically, but we're going to be talking about more, is ESG. And we believe the nuclear industry is leading the green revolution. And one of the statistics that's really interesting, and I like to point out, is if you take a look at the uranium production from Lost Creek and Shirley Basin, you combine those two, the resources in the ground, you compare the energy generation there compared to coal-fired power, we're going to offset about 312 million metric tons of CO2, which is the equivalent of taking about 67 million cars off the road for a year. We're very proud of that, and we're going to be talking about that more going forward. We're also taking other steps to try to reduce our footprint. Earlier this year, well, actually late last year, early this year, we acquired an office here in Casper, Wyoming, and we're going to be building out a construction facility and lab there. That will allow our employees, many of them, to work from town instead of making the trip out to the mine site every day. That's safer for our employees. It's less CO2 emissions from vehicles traveling back and forth, and it's good ESG. We are using the in-situ technology for our mining operations. There's minimal impact with in-situ. There's no tailings. There's no removal of overburden. When we're done and we leave, we clean up the site. You won't even be able to tell we were there, and the site will be releasable for unrestricted use. It can be used for anything. We've also taken great strides to recycle more and more of our wastewater. We're an industry leader in that regard. We are recycling well over 99.5% of our water. We have a goal of getting up to a 99.8% recycle rate, and we've got an ongoing project to be able to move us in that direction. And we're making great strides, and very optimistic that we're going to be able to do that in the coming months. So as you guys, you sit and you listen to presentations in this conference, I'm sure you've heard a lot of companies say, we've got great management, we're proven, we know how to do things. And I've said all of those same things, but I wanted to introduce this slide because I think it puts a numeric representation of that. And what it tries to show here is the dilution to our shareholders since 2011. And you can see that we're in the bottom left there, URE, and it compares our dilution to some of our domestic competitors here in the US. We run a tight ship. Our people at the mine site, our senior management at the executive level, we are in situ miners. This is what we've done for decades. We know how to put pounds in the can. We've also worked through some very difficult markets in the uranium space. And so we know how to run it tight when we need to. And this dilution chart shows that we are able to do that. In our company, dilution is a dirty word. So looking at our market position, we've got a great cash war chest right now. At the beginning of last month, we had 44.7 million in unrestricted cash available. Market cap of around 400 million. It's been very volatile with the market lately, but it's generally improving. I earlier mentioned that inventory that we have, 284,000 pounds sitting at the conversion facility. We can convert that over to cash in about a week. So again, today it's worth about $18 million. We are holding on to that inventory for now because we would like to sell it to the federal government once the uranium reserve program is finally stood up. So we're holding on to that, looking for a little bit better prices. But if the spot price continues to improve, like it has been, and it's been improving dramatically, then we might pull the trigger and sell some of that into the market. So we are listed on the Russell Index, and looking forward to being able to maintain that status this year when that reconstitution date comes up. We've got great analyst coverage both in the US and in Canada. So a lot of great news in that respect. So one last slide here, some of our takeaways. We're well financed. We've got a great solid runway through 2022, great inventories to be able to sell into the market. We've also got the capacity to ramp up to a 2 million pound run rate between both Lost Creek and after the build out of our Shirley Basin project, which is fully permitted. We've got been able to keep that core staff ready to go. Got that drilling program ongoing to shorten that ramp up time. So we're extremely well positioned and believe we can ramp up with minimal dilution. Our needs going forward are absolutely minimal. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you. And here's our last slide with the contact information. Feel free to reach out if you have any further questions after the presentation.
Thank you, John. Okay, we've got lots of questions for you. Excuse me. Matt Ramos asks, there are several junior uranium mining companies globally. What distinguishes UR Energy from the other junior miners?
A great question, and we get that a lot. I think what really sets us apart is we are proven. We have proven at Lost Creek that we can produce. We've produced over 2.6 million pounds, about 2.7 million pounds of U3O8. There are not many other juniors in the U.S. or even globally that can make that claim. So I think that's what really sets us apart. And the reason we've been so successful is, a couple of reasons. We do have the people that are experienced in the industry, but we've got a great property in Lost Creek. It's been a fantastic producer with really good recovery rates. And that's not something that our competitors can really say. We are proven. So I think that's really what sets us apart.
Wonderful. A happy shareholder, Frank Seigan, asks, well, he says you have some big shoes to fill on Mr. Klinda's departure, and he's sure he has left you in a great position to succeed. With that being said, how are you positioned with the DoD in regards to government contracts? And are you speaking to utilities? And finally, will you entertain any mergers or acquisitions in the near future?
That's a lot. I'll try to take them in order. So yeah, Jeff is retiring in June. Yeah, big shoes to fill. He's done a fantastic job of running a really tight ship, putting together a great management team. So I continue to communicate with him on a daily basis. In fact, I've already talked to him this morning. I'll talk to him again today. But he's been a great mentor and looking forward to trying to fill his shoes. But as far as contracting going forward, we have not pursued any contracts with DoD. Our pursuit of contracts is really on the commercial side with domestic utilities, and we are actively engaged in conversations with them. We have not signed any contracts yet, but we are working toward that. No promises, but we are aggressively pushing. It's clear that the domestic utilities are really beginning to understand that they cannot be so reliant on Russia and potentially Kazakhstan going forward. So they are beginning to understand they've got to come home. They've got to come to get domestic supplies to be able to secure their supply going forward. With regard to M&A, yeah, we are interested in M&A, but I'll quote Jeff, we're only going to get married to somebody that looks like us. We are a historic producer. We are a mining company. Many of you who have known us for a long time, you know that we are not a promotional company. Our marketing budget is absolutely minimal. And so if we're going to go out and merge with somebody, it would be our strong preference to merge with somebody who is an existing producer or a near-term producer with high quality assets. And if they don't check those boxes, it's going to be really hard for us to get interested in M&A. So hopefully that's responsive.
Great answer. Keith Davidson asks if you can go over your production costs across different products and regions, and where do you expect to expand to geographically?
Okay, so I'll focus on the two flagship properties. If you take a look at our annual report that just came out and is posted on our website, we included with that two new technical reports, one for Lost Creek and one for Shirley Basin. But if you take a look at our C1 mine site cash cost, we're on both of those projects, we're looking right at around $16 a pound. If you take a look at the all-in site cost, we're looking at about $33 a pound for both of those projects. So fantastic cost structures. We are very keenly aware of the impact of inflation, and those estimates, they had included inflation up to that date, and so that's built in. We're also very aware of supply disruption. Keep in mind, we are an operating mine, so we are continuing to order supplies, and we know how long it takes to get things, but we're ahead of the curve. And so we've been ordering ahead. We know how long things are going to take. We continually test the market and make sure that we can get supplies in a timely manner. When those supply chains get too long, we've given our guys the green light to be able to go out and make those purchases well in advance. So those things are all considered in those economics. As far as additional growth, we have several opportunities there. I pointed out the area around Lost Creek. We've performed a number of exploration programs over the years, every one of them has been very successful at bringing in additional pounds into Lost Creek and at a very, very low cost. And I'm going to go to M&A there. Oftentimes we'll be approached by a company that says, okay, we'll sell you our assets for X number of dollars. Commonly, our response is, why would we buy those pounds from you when we have an area that's adjacent to our plant that we've been able to grow the resource at remarkably cheaper cost? So we have to compare apples to apples, and that's one of the reasons why we've not been terribly interested in M&A. But even outside of Lost Creek, there are other opportunities in the Great Divide Basin on other projects we hold, Lost Soldier, North Hatzel, and others that are all described in those reports that we have opportunities to go to and explore and find more pounds.
Great. Thank you for that thorough answer. Robert Dimmenbrunn asks, with the spot price of uranium at $64, would it make sense to produce additional pounds now and sell into the spot market?
Great question. We contemplate that on a daily basis as we continue to watch the spot price climb. But historically, our company, we've been run very conservatively. I'm going to continue to do the same thing. To sink our capital into the mine site, to try to feed into what can be a fairly ephemeral spot market is fairly risky. And it has always been our objective to get long-term contracts and to sell into those because they provide long-term security. We sink that capital into the mine, but we know at the end of the day, we've got a great long-term contract to sign in or to sell into at a profitable rate. So that's why we've not made the decision to sell into spot. Having said that, if things continue to climb, we will reevaluate that going forward. If we develop some confidence that that market on the spot is not going to evaporate on us, we may decide to pull the trigger and ramp up production.
Great. Bernie Weir asks, what's happening with establishing the U.S. Uranium Reserve? Are there clear milestones yet?
Unfortunately, there are not clear milestones yet. That's been very frustrating working with the Department of Energy. That bill was passed during the Trump administration, during the last days of the Trump administration, but it was passed in a bipartisan manner. There was great support for it, yet the Department of Energy has been very slow in getting the program stood up. And I wish I could tell you that there were good milestones, and I could say that we expect RFPs from the government in the near term, but I can't say that. We have been given guidance by DOE that they are working on establishing the program, and the term they use is soon we will be going out with RFPs. I can't define what soon is. Having said that, there is additional legislation that was introduced very recently by Senator Barrasso here in Wyoming to advance the uranium reserve and actually grow it. So there's a lot of pressure right now in Congress because people are realizing we are way too dependent on Russia for supplies. So there's a push to grow domestic capacity, not just from the Republicans from Western states where there are uranium mines, but just literally a few days ago, Senator Manchin, a Democrat from West Virginia, introduced some incredible legislation that would strongly grow the U.S. industry if it's passed. So you can see we've got great support across the board. We just got to bring that to fruition.
Thank you for that. Ada Martin has reviewed your year-end financial statements when she was reading your coming on this conference, but do you ever give guidance to your Q1 or for the next 12 months?
Not at this point. We are, with that drilling program that we have ongoing, our costs are slightly higher than normal. Typically, our burn rate's about $2.5 million per quarter. We'll be concluding that drilling program here within just a few weeks. And unless we decide to continue that drilling program, our burn rate will resort back to about that 2.5 million per quarter. But until we get contracts signed, we're going to continue to run very lean, keep our cost as low as possible. So I think you can expect more in 2022 of what you saw in 21, unless we pull the trigger and decide to ramp up based on contracting.
Francis Rowe asks, is it true that your home state of Wyoming is becoming nuclear friendly? And comment how that might affect local politics, help or hinder your growth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Wyoming has, I think, always been strongly supportive of the nuclear industry. There has been uranium mining going on in this state since the late 50s. early 60s. In fact, one of the earliest mines was our Shirley Basin project. And so there is very strong support within the state. You have to keep in mind that the income for the state of Wyoming is largely derived from oil and gas and mining. Everyone knows that in the state. It's a very small state. Our population is only about 450,000 people. The vast majority of that population works in natural resource recovery. And last year, TerraPower announced that they would be building out a small modular reactor in Wyoming. That's Bill Gates's company. So far, we've seen tremendous response, a positive response from the state of Wyoming. And we believe the state of Wyoming is aggressively pursuing other opportunities in the nuclear space. So great place to be. Mining is well understood, is well regulated, and we're happy to be in Wyoming. We think it's probably one of the top 1 or 2 states to be in for uranium mining.
Fantastic. Austin Lopez states Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been driving the price higher recently. Do you expect the price to continue to go upward if Russia abandons its efforts in Ukraine?
Great question. Difficult to answer. I think there are 2 things that are really driving the price right now. One, the spot price in particular. One is the spot. They continue to be heavy into purchasing. They've been very successful at raising money on their ATM and then feeding that money into purchasing. So that's having a dramatic impact on price, but also on the long-term price, that's being more affected by the Russian issue. I think if that issue just dissolves today, some miraculous act of God, and that issue is put to bed, I think the domestic utilities still see that there's a need for domestic supply. They can't continue to rely on Russia. So it's difficult to answer in the shorter term, but if we look longer term, I think the world really understands now that to decarbonize, we have to go nuclear. And so if we ignore the short-term volatility and we look longer term, I think there's absolutely incredible growth potential coming forward from China, India. The U.S. builds here small modular reactors. So yeah, I think the price will continue to rise. I think it's going to be volatile in the coming weeks and months, depending on what Russia does. And very, very importantly, the legislation, the anti-Russian legislation that's going through Congress right now, depending on the outcome of that legislation. If Congress cuts off that supply from Russia, and especially if that has an impact on Kazakh imports, wow, that could have dramatic impacts on the market. I'm not going to make any predictions on that. I gave that up a long time ago, making predictions on what Congress is going to do, but we are watching very carefully.
We all are. Angel Martin asks if you can tell us about your relationship and current negotiations with U.S. utilities regarding long-term contracts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not much I can say about that other than to say that we have relationships with virtually all of the U.S. utility companies. We are in communication with virtually all of them. They know us, they know our property, and so we're aggressively pursuing contracts. In fact, I would say that as a CEO, that is my number 1 objective for the company for this year, is to be able to sign profitable long-term contracts with domestic utilities.
And Dana Moss, are you having any issues with obtaining labor for your projects? And how has the job market been for you at your locations?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that's unique to us. I think in any mining industry across the board, that's a challenge. To date, we've been successful at hiring, but I'll throw in, we have to redouble and triple our efforts to be able to go out and find people. So yeah, we've been successful, but it's only been after great effort. And as we look toward ramp up, that's probably going to be one of our greatest challenges, is getting manpower. Again, we believe we can, but we're going to have to be ahead of things and keep a very close eye on it.
Jen Jordan is new to your company and says, great presentation, but wants you to explain how uranium demand is in relation to oil, natural gas, solar, and the growth potential of uranium versus all the others.
Yeah, so one of the reasons the price of uranium was in decline for so long is we were attempting to compete with natural gas. And the fracking plays that really drove the price of natural gas down. That's been reversed now. in the U.S., but especially in Europe. People are realizing the prices are going up. They can't rely on that Russian supply. So speaking specifically to natural gas, those scenarios are being reversed, and companies are beginning to recognize, hey, nuclear, yeah, while it wasn't as cheap as natural gas historically, or at least in the last few years, that's changing. We need to take a fresh look at it. From a carbon-free perspective, we're in direct competition with solar and wind. We'll continue to compete with them. They are certainly getting some government subsidies that our industry has not enjoyed in the past. That's made it a little bit difficult to compete. But having said that, I think there's a growing realization that the sun goes down at night and the wind doesn't blow all the time. Even here in Wyoming, believe it or not, the wind doesn't blow all the time. And so companies are looking for that reliable base load energy that they can put into the energy grid. And that's nuclear. That's not wind. That's not solar. Certainly there is a place for them, but nuclear has got to be that base load for carbon free going forward. So we'll continue to compete. Markets will be up and down, but I think recent events have really highlighted the importance of having reliable base load energy, so you don't have to be reliant on other countries that are not necessarily your friends.
Right. Frank Sandoval says uranium is up about 300% over the past 12 months. What price does it have to stay above in order for your production costs to be worth growing? And does your production costs vary by location?
So I'll take them in reverse order. The production cost that we have projected for Shirley Basin is slightly less than at Lost Creek. So I would encourage you to take a look at the technical reports that we put out. But the reason Shirley Basin is a little bit cheaper is because it's a brownfield project. A lot of the infrastructure is already there, so we don't have to build it out. The deposit is very shallow. Having said that, it's not too shallow, because with in-situ mining, you have to thread the needle there, but it's in just the right sweet spot. And it's completely drilled out. We don't have to invest capital in additional exploration and delineation. We know where the ore is at. We can go out there and begin installing production wells tomorrow if we wanted to. So that drives the cost down at Shirley Basin just a little bit. But really, the cost between there and Lost Creek are very similar. But as far as making decisions on where the market needs to be before we start to grow production, that's not a number that we've put out in the market. We don't want competitors to know what we're bidding with the utilities. So I'll keep that hidden from public view, but we're getting there. Certainly the spot market today, if you take a look at our financials that we've reported in those tech reports, the spot market today, we're well into the money. The long-term market tends to lag the spot by quite a bit, and it's lagging it right now. It's about $48 a pound, but it is coming up. But it needs to go a little bit further before we see utilities buying domestic pounds. But I should comment, too, that we are hearing that the domestic utilities understand that there's going to need to be a premium to lock in domestic supplies, and that's important to them from a security of supply perspective. And so we believe that there could turn out to be a bifurcated market where domestic and or Western world production takes on a greater value because it's simply safer to the utilities.
Makes sense. Will Lane thanks you for coming on the conference. And he says, when you said supply disruption, what do you mean? Is that the supplies you need to build hard assets or supplies needed for production? Can you hash that out for us?
Yeah, you bet. So in the in-situ world, obviously there are a number of supplies we need. We need chemicals, sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid, oxygen, CO2, cement for cementing in wells. But we also rely on a lot of hydrocarbon products like PVC well casing and HDPE or plastic piping to build out the well fields. So we are able to get those materials. We have not had anybody tell us, no, you can't get them. Certainly on some components of that, the lead times have grown fairly dramatically. We've been well aware of that for some time. We have a purchasing program in place to be well ahead of the curve, so that if we get the signal tomorrow to ramp up production, we have all of the supplies we need on hand. Keep in mind, Header House 2-4, it's nearly constructed now. So we've got that one that we could bring into production. Essentially everything we need for Header House 2.5, the next one beyond that, it's either on the ground or it's ordered and will be here shortly. And our guys have instructions, if there's anything that's further lead time out than that, get it ordered. So we've not been told no on anything. What we consistently hear though is, yeah, it's going to take a few more weeks or a few more months than normal to get it. We're well aware of that. As an operating miner, we've been ordering those materials anyway, so we know what the lead times are, and we are continually testing that market to make sure the lead times don't get too long. If they start to get too long, we go ahead and order to stay ahead of the curve.
Aaron Strange really enjoys your presentation and wants you to comment on the community water supply and uranium leaching in public drinking water.
So that's a very broad question. I'll answer it with respect to Lost Creek. There is no public at Lost Creek. It's an incredibly remote mine site. Our guys from Casper, Wyoming, they drive 2 hours to get to the site. The nearest community of any size is Rollins. It's an hour from the site. We have had great success in maintaining our water balance at the site and maintaining control of those solutions. The aquifer that we work in, obviously it contains a uranium mineralized body. So before we got there, Mother Nature contaminated the groundwater. It was grossly contaminated with uranium, radium, gross alpha, gross beta, and other radionuclides. And as we mine, we are actually removing those from the system. When we're done mining, we will restore the groundwater. The primary goal is to take it back to its baseline condition, which we know very well. And so that's our primary objective. One of the things that's a bit unique about Lost Creek is a lot of the contaminants that you see at other projects, we don't have in the Great Divide Basin. So we believe the effort to clean up that groundwater and restore it back to a baseline condition at Lost Creek is going to be remarkably simpler than at other facilities, simply because a lot of those compounds are not there. So we've done a great job so far, and we believe final cleanup when we're done is going to be relatively simple. And there is no public water system out there to be concerned about. We are a long, long ways from town.
Good to know. Irene Nelson says, I assume you're selling all you can produce now. What do you need to do to 10 times your sales? Is it a matter of funding needed for new properties or expansion? And if so, are you currently raising funds? And do you have a PPM?
So right now we are, as we continue production, our production is pretty minimal right now because market conditions have been so poor. So we've allowed production to decline because we don't want to put our capital in the ground until we know we've got a return for it. Having said that, we do have that drilling program that we started in the fall as prices began to recover. So we have that going on. But right now, we are not selling into the market. Any of the pounds that we produce right now, we are holding either at the plant or at the conversion facility in Metropolis, Illinois. So there's no sales right now. We are looking to sign those long-term contracts with utilities to be able to sell into those. We like that security of the long-term contract. We've got a great cash position. You know, beginning of last month, we had $44.7 million in cash. In addition to that, we had about $18 million worth of inventory that we could sell. So if we raise money going forward to be able to ramp up Lost Creek or to build out Shirley Basin, we believe our needs are going to be fairly minimal. So no, we are not out looking at a big equity raise right now. We simply don't need it. We do have an ATM facility in place. We used that sum back in 2021. We may continue to use that sum in 2022 just to keep our war chest in good order. But we're going to try to lean on that fairly lightly. But it is out there. We may continue to use it. But as far as any big raises, that is not in the cards today because we have a good war chest to be able to call on. Now, if there is an opportunity for M&A or a larger ramp up than what I've discussed, then yeah, we may go out on the market and do a larger raise. But it's probably going to take one of those two scenarios before we go out and hit the market really hard with a big raise. Again, dilution in our company is a dirty word. We don't like it. We're going to try to minimize it as best we can going forward.
John, last question for you from Dominic Pozzi, who is a happy shareholder. Has there been any thought of selling off the gold project to add more to your cash position?
Yeah, the gold project is a little bit of an afterthought. When we acquired Pathfinder Mines Corporation in 2013, we had a tremendous precious metals database that came along with that. And our geologist found that project in that database. So we went out and staked the claims. Actually, some fantastic gold grades on the surface. We've done a little bit of work out there, but I want to emphasize that is not a primary project of ours. It's not something that we really focus on a lot. We like the project, but it's certainly not our expertise. So I want to emphasize that. And it's not something that we've put much effort or money into. And going forward, we probably won't put a lot of money or effort into it. So yes, if there was someone out there that was interested in that project, we would certainly entertain offers for it. Until we get a good offer on it, though, we'll continue to work on it from time to time and see if we can't grow it into something of more value.
John, do you have any closing remarks?
I think what I would leave everybody with is what really separates us from the competitors is we are proven. There are a lot of companies out there that really focus on marketing. They do a lot of cheerleading. We're pretty quiet in that regard. We don't put a lot of money toward marketing. We let our production, we let our cost of production do the talking for us. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at our economics, take a look at our past performance. And if you have any questions, be glad to talk to anybody further. Just get in touch.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Great presentation. And we hope you come back with some updates in the future.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
All right, everyone, stay with us. We're going to take a quick, about 15-minute break, but we'll be back with another exciting presentation. We'll see you soon.